She set out with her cat for a soul-cleansing hike on the Appalachian Trail. But when a brutal storm hit, she vanished without a trace. 5 years later, a chilling discovery in a remote cabin's chimney would unravel a nightmare no one saw coming. Hey, don't forget to like. Please subscribe for more shocking crime stories and hit the bell icon. The darkest truth are yet to come. The Appalachian Trail stretches over 20 miles, a ribbon of wilderness weaving through the heart of America's eastern mountains. It's a place of raw beauty, where hikers chase solitude and strength, but also where danger lurks in the shadows of its dense forests. In late August 2017, 29-year-old Mara Hensley, an experienced hiker with a quiet confidence, embarked on a solo trek through a rugged section of the trail in Virginia. With her was Juniper, her sleek gray tabby cat, a constant companion whose soft purrs had been her anchor through years of personal storms. Mara was no stranger to the trail. She'd logged hundreds of miles, knew its twists and turns, and carried the kind of gear that spoke of meticulous preparation. But when she failed to check in after 3 days, her partner, Ethan Cole, felt a gnawing dread settle in his chest. What could silence someone so capable, someone who lived for these mountains? Mara and Ethan had been together for 7 years, their bond forged in the crucible of shared adventures. They'd met at a local climbing gym, their love for the outdoors blossoming into plans for a future filled with more trails, maybe even a family. Mara, a graphic designer, had been burning out at work, her creativity stifled by endless deadlines. This hike was her reset, a chance to reconnect with herself. Ethan couldn't join her work, kept him tethered to their small apartment in Richmond, but he'd kissed her goodbye, watching as she loaded her forest green backpack into her car. Juniper curled in her travel crate. "Call me when you hit the checkpoint," he'd said, half smiling. Mara had nodded, her hazel eyes bright with anticipation. She promised to send a signal via her satellite messenger every evening, a routine they'd perfected over years of hikes. By August 29th, when the first check-in never came, Ethan tried to stay calm. Maybe the satellite messenger had glitched. Maybe she was in a signal-dead zone. The Appalachian Trail could be unpredictable, cell service was spotty, and the terrain was unforgiving. But as the hours stretched into a second day of silence, his rationalizations crumbled. Mara was disciplined, almost obsessive about safety protocols. She wouldn't miss a check-in, not without a reason. Ethan drove to the trailhead, a remote gravel lot nestled in Virginia's Blue Ridge Mountains. Mara's car was there, parked neatly, its interior untouched, no note, no sign of her. The forest loomed around him, dense and silent, swallowing his calls of her name. Imagine standing there, shouting into the void, knowing the person you love most is out there somewhere. But the only answer is the rustle of leaves. It's the kind of moment that makes your heart feel like it's cracking. Ethan alerted the local sheriff's department, his voice steady but tight as he relayed every detail. Mara's route, her gear, her bright yellow rain jacket, and Juniper's distinctive red harness with a tiny silver bell. He handed over a photo he'd taken just weeks before, a candid shot of Mara laughing on a rocky outcrop, Juniper perched on her shoulder, the cat's green eyes glinting in the sunlight. It was a moment of pure joy, one Ethan clung to as he described Mara's preparedness, her small 9mm pistol tucked into her pack for protection against wildlife. The sheriff's department didn't hesitate. The terrain was too vast, too dangerous for delay. By dusk on August 30th, a search and rescue operation was underway. A sprawling effort involving helicopters, K9 units, and seasoned trackers. The Appalachian Trail in this region is a beast-steep ridges, tangled underbrush, and weather that can turn on a dime. Mara's planned route was a 40-mile loop, challenging but well within her skill set. Search teams fanned out, their boots crunching through the forest, eyes scanning for any sign of footprint, a scrap of fabric, the glint of that silver bell. Ethan joined them, his knowledge of Mara's habits guiding their efforts. He pointed out her favorite types of campsites, her knack for finding shelter under rock overhangs. But days passed, and the wilderness offered nothing. No trace of her yellow jacket, no paw prints from Juniper, no discarded gear. It was as if the forest had swallowed them whole. The searchers were baffled. Mara's bright clothing should have been a beacon in the green sea of trees. Juniper's red harness was designed to stand out. Yet, every ravine checked, every trail scoured, turned up empty. The initial theories leaned toward the usual suspects: a fall from a cliff, a bear encounter, or disorientation in the dense woods. But Mara's experience made these seem unlikely. She knew how to read a map, how to brace against a fall. Her pistol was enough to deter most wildlife, and Juniper, though small, was agile and alert. Ethan insisted she'd never take unnecessary risks. She'd hunker down, wait it out, he told the lead investigator, his voice breaking. She's not reckless. Then came the weather. A freak storm had torn through the area on the second day of Mara's hike, dumping torrential rain and whipping winds across the mountains. The search teams zeroed in on this, theorizing that Mara might have been caught off guard, forced off her path, or succumbed to hypothermia. Divers scoured swollen streams, while ground teams combed the banks for any sign of her or Juniper. On the fifth day, a breakthrough. Trackers found a single set of human footprints near a muddy creek bed, accompanied by faint claw-like marks that could belong to a cat. The prints were fresh enough to suggest they were Mara's, but they led to the water's edge and stopped. The creek was fast-moving, its currents vicious from the storm. The working theory hardened. Mara, disoriented and desperate, had tried to cross the creek and been swept away, Juniper with her. It was a tragic, plausible explanation, one that fit the evidence, or lack thereof. But Ethan wasn't convinced. She'd never cross a creek like that in a storm, he argued, his voice raw with frustration. She knew better. He pointed to her training, her survival courses, the way she'd always planned for the worst. The investigators nodded, but the footprints were all they had. The search dragged on for weeks, the urgency fading as resources dwindled. By October 2017, the trail was dusted with early snow, making searches treacherous. The case went cold, officially listed as a probable drowning. For Ethan, the loss was a wound that refused to heal. He'd sit in their apartment, staring at Juniper's empty bed, wondering how the mountains they both loved could betray them so completely. The Appalachian Trail became a ghost story, a whispered warning among hikers. Even the most prepared can vanish. 5 years passed. The world moved on, but Ethan couldn't. He kept Mara's photo on his desk, her smile a constant reminder of unanswered questions. The trail remained unchanged, its beauty masking its secrets. In June 2022, a new chapter began in an unlikely place, a dilapidated, public-use cabin tucked deep in the Virginia section of the trail, miles from where Mara was last thought to be. These cabins, relics of older times, were maintained by the state for hikers seeking shelter. But many had fallen into ruin, becoming safety hazards. Enter Clara Voss, a state contractor hired to inspect and decommission these structures before fire season. Her job was straightforward: check for structural issues, clear out debris, and ensure no wildlife was trapped inside. It was lonely work, navigating remote trails to reach forgotten cabins. But Clara was used to the solitude. On June 14th, Clara arrived at one of the most isolated cabins on her list. It sat in a small clearing, its weathered logs blending into the forest. The air was heavy with the scent of pine and decay. She began her inspection, methodical and thorough, checking the sagging roof and crumbling foundation. Inside the cabin was a time capsule, dusty, dim, with a faint, musty smell. The fireplace, built from rough stone, dominated the single room. Clara's final task was the chimney. Animals often nested there, and protocol demanded a check to avoid harming them during demolition. She hauled a ladder from her truck, climbed onto the roof, and approached the chimney. The metal cap was rusted shut, heavier than expected, as if sealed with intent. Using a crowbar, she pried it open, the metal groaning under the strain. When it finally gave way, a faint, sour odor drifted up something beyond the usual damp rot. Clara peered into the dark shaft, her flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. What she saw froze her in place. Wedged inside, several feet down, was the mummified body of a cat. Its gray fur was shriveled, stretched tight over fragile bones, its tiny claws gripping the brickwork as if it had fought to climb out. The cat's head was tilted upward, mouth open, in a silent scream, eyes reduced to dark hollows. A faint glint caught Clara's eye, a tiny silver bell, still attached to a faded red harness. The sight was visceral, a punch to the gut. This wasn't a natural death. The cat had been trapped, sealed in with no escape. Clara stumbled back, her breath shallow. The image burned into her mind. Imagine finding something like that, alone on a roof, miles from anyone. Would you keep looking or run? She radioed her supervisor, her voice trembling as she described the discovery. The demolition was halted, and local authorities were called in. At first, they treated it as animal cruelty, a sickening act, but isolated. The remains were carefully extracted, the chimney dismantled brick by brick, to preserve the fragile body. The necropsy revealed a horrifying truth. The cat had died of smoke inhalation and heat exposure, its lungs filled with soot, its lower body scorched. It had been alive when a fire burned below, clawing desperately to escape a sealed chimney. The cruelty was deliberate, calculated, and deeply unsettling. But who was this cat? And why was it here? In a cabin, far from any trail. Investigators scanned for a microchip, hoping to identify the owner. The scan pinged a match. The cat was Juniper, registered to Mara Hensley. The discovery sent shockwaves through the cold case unit. Mara hadn't drowned. She'd made it to this cabin, miles from the creek where her footprints were found. The implications were staggering. The prevailing theory of an accidental death was shattered, replaced by a darker question. What happened to Mara inside that cabin? The case was reopened, the cabin now a crime scene. Ethan was notified, the news ripping open old wounds. He'd always believed Mara's disappearance wasn't an accident. And now, the truth seemed closer and more terrifying than ever. The investigation zeroed in on the cabin, a public use shelter open to anyone. Years of hikers had passed through, leaving behind layers of debris and contamination. Finding evidence from 2017 was like searching for a needle in a haystack. The logbook, meant to record visitors, was missing, no surprise in a place so transient. But the forensic team was relentless, scouring every inch. In the crawl space beneath the floorboards, they found it. A forest. Green backpack, caked in dirt, hidden with purpose. It was Mara's, the same one from Ethan's photo. Inside were her essentials, water bottle, map, protein bars, but her pistol was gone. The backpack's concealment screamed foul play. Someone had wanted Mara erased. The discovery of Juniper's remains and Mara's backpack shifted the case from tragedy to crime. The sealed chimney, the missing gun, the hidden backpack all pointed to a deliberate act. But the real break came when a forensic technician, examining the fireplace, noticed something carved into the underside of the mantel. Faint, deliberate scratches formed a strange, looping pattern, not random graffiti, but something purposeful, hidden from casual view. The symbols didn't match any known designs, not local folklore or common vandalism. They felt personal, like a signature left by someone who knew they'd never be seen. The team photographed them, sensing they held the key to Mara's fate. As the investigation deepened, the symbols became the focus. Were they a cult's mark? A killer's calling card? The team consulted experts in occult practices, but the patterns were unique, untraceable. The cabin, once a footnote in the search, was now the epicenter of a mystery that felt increasingly sinister. Ethan, haunted by the news, drove to the site, standing outside the cabin as investigators worked. He clutched Mara's photo, Juniper's bell glinting in the image. "I always knew she didn't just disappear," he whispered to a detective. The question now was, who was in that cabin with Mara and Juniper? And what did they do to them? Cliffhanger. The symbols carved in the mantle were unlike anything the investigators had seen, but they were about to lead to a place no one expected: a remote farm, a hidden truth, and a darkness that had been waiting for 5 years to be uncovered. The carvings on the underside of the cabin's mantle were a puzzle, a cryptic signature left in the shadows of a forgotten shelter on the Appalachian Trail. Their looping, deliberate patterns haunted the investigators, a breadcrumb trail to a truth far darker than anyone had imagined. Mara Hensley, a seasoned hiker, and her beloved cat Juniper had vanished in August 2017, presumed lost to a storm-swollen creek. But the discovery of Juniper's mummified remains in a sealed chimney, and Mara's hidden backpack in the cabin's crawlspace turned a tragic accident into a chilling crime. The symbols were the key, but they were unlike anything in the databases. No gang marks, no known occult signs. They felt personal, obsessive, a window into a mind that thrived on secrecy. As the investigation pivoted to this new lead, the question burned. Who carved those symbols? And what did they do to Mara? The Virginia wilderness, with its endless ridges and tangled forests, held its secrets tightly. The cabin, a public-use shelter, had seen countless hikers since 2017, each leaving their marked cigarette butts, food wrappers, scratched initials. Isolating evidence from Mara's time, there was a nightmare. The missing logbook, which might have named other visitors, only deepened the mystery. Was it lost to time, or taken to hide a killer's presence? Investigators turned to the symbols, digitizing them for analysis. They consulted anthropologists, historians, even tattoo artists, hoping someone might recognize the pattern. Weeks passed with no hits, the trail growing colder, but the team refused to let Mara's case fade back into the shadows. They knew those carvings were a message, left by someone who thought they'd never be found. Imagine being an investigator, staring at those strange symbols late at night, knowing they're the only link to a woman who vanished without a trace. It's the kind of thing that keeps you up, wondering what kind of person leaves a mark like that. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a local woodworker named Lila Harmon, who ran a small shop in a nearby town. She'd seen the symbol images circulated in a regional artisan newsletter. "I know that pattern," she told detectives over the phone, her voice hesitant but certain. "It's not common, it's custom work." Lila explained she'd been commissioned in early 2017 to carve a set of intricate wooden panels for a private client. The design matched the cabin's carvings exactly, swirling loops, almost hypnotic in their precision. She'd kept sketches, meticulous records of the project, and agreed to meet the investigators. Lila's workshop was a cluttered haven of sawdust and half-finished projects. She spread out her sketches, the patterns unmistakable. The client was specific, she said. Wanted every detail perfect, like it meant something sacred. The commission was for a remote homestead owned by two sisters, Nora and Evelyn Tate, who lived on a sprawling property about 20 miles from the cabin. The names didn't ring any bells, no criminal records, no connection to Mara. But the geographic proximity was chilling. The Tate sisters' homestead was accessible via old logging roads, close enough to the Appalachian Trail for someone to slip into the cabin during a storm. Investigators dug deeper. The sisters held hunting permits for the area in 2017, placing them in the vicinity when Mara vanished. It was circumstantial, but it was enough for a search warrant. The Tate homestead was a fortress of solitude, tucked deep in the Virginia woods, surrounded by dense pines and a high wooden fence. The sisters, both in their late 40s, were known in their small community as eccentric but private, rarely seen in town. Neighbors described them as self-sufficient, living off their land, tending a small orchard and a few livestock. But there were whispers, stories of strange bonfires at night, of visitors who came and went without explanation. As the tactical team approached the property in July 2022, the air felt heavy, charged with anticipation. The fence bore carved wooden panels, their swirling patterns a perfect match to the cabin's mantel. It was a gut-punch confirmation that this was no coincidence. The sisters were home, and the team moved swiftly, taking them into custody without resistance. Nora, the older sister, was calm, almost serene, while Evelyn's eyes darted nervously, betraying a crack in their composure. The search of the homestead was methodical, every outbuilding and corner scrutinized. The main house was sparse, almost monastic, with minimal furniture and walls bare of personal touches. But in a locked shed at the edge of the property, investigators found something that turned their blood cold. The shed was a shrine of sorts, its walls lined with more of those swirling carvings, etched into wood and painted in dark, earthy hues. There were shelves of animal bones, small skulls, likely rabbits or raccoons arranged with unsettling care. A leather-bound journal, detailed rituals, referencing offerings and cleansing through sacrifice. The symbols appeared repeatedly, described as a conduit to purity. It was clear the sisters followed a private, obsessive belief system, one that blended personal mysticism with something far darker. But where was the evidence tying them to Mara? The search continued, every discovery adding weight to the growing dread. In a second outbuilding, used as a workshop, investigators found a locked metal box hidden beneath a workbench. Inside was a 9mm pistol, its serial number scratched but still legible. It matched Mara's missing gun. The find was electrifying, a direct link to the crime. The sisters had taken it, either as a trophy or to hide their tracks. But the most chilling discovery came in the journal. One entry, dated August 2017, described a visitor in the storm, a woman who wandered into the sacred space. The language was cryptic but deliberate, hinting at an encounter that ended in violence. The investigators knew they were close, but Mara's fate and her body remained elusive. Nora and Evelyn were interrogated separately, the detectives leaning on their years of experience with complex cases. Evelyn was a wall, silent and unyielding, her face a mask of defiance. Nora, though, was different. She spoke in riddles, her voice soft but unnervingly calm, describing the carvings as protection for their land. When pressed about the gun, she faltered, her eyes flickering with something like fear. The detectives laid out the evidence, the carvings, the gun, Juniper's horrific death. They theorized the cat had fought back, clawing at one of them in defense of Mara. Nora's hand twitched, brushing her wrist, where faint, faded scars crisscrossed the skin marks consistent with cat scratches. Old, but deep. It was a small gesture, but it broke her. Nora's confession came slowly, each word heavy, with a strange mix of remorse and conviction. She and Evelyn had been at the cabin during the August 2017 storm, seeking shelter after a hunting trip. Mara arrived, soaked and exhausted, with Juniper in her harness. The sisters welcomed her, sharing the small space, the fire crackling in the hearth. Mara, trusting their kindness, let her guard down, even setting aside her gun as they talked. But to Nora and Evelyn, Mara's arrival wasn't chance, it was fate, a test of their beliefs. Their journal spoke of cleansing through sacrifice, a ritual they'd perfected with animals but never humans. Until Mara, as she slept, they attacked, strangling her in a swift, silent act they believed would purify their path. Juniper, sensing the danger, lashed out, clawing Evelyn's wrist before they trapped the cat in the fireplace, sealing the chimney to let her suffocate in the smoke. It was an act of cruelty, born from rage and ritual. They hid Mara's backpack, took her gun, and burned the logbook to erase their presence. Mara's body, Nora revealed, was buried in a clearing deep on their property, beneath an old oak they'd marked with their symbols. The confession was chilling, a window into a twisted worldview that saw murder as a sacred act. Investigators moved quickly, excavating the clearing Nora described. Cadaver dogs led them to the spot, and after hours of digging, they found her Mara Hensley's remains, wrapped in a tarp, her yellow rain jacket still faintly visible. The discovery brought Ethan to his knees when he was told. A mix of relief and devastation. 5 years of questions had answers, but the truth was a wound of its own. The legal process was swift. Nora, seeking leniency, pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and animal cruelty, receiving life without parole. Evelyn went to trial, her defense claiming she was under Nora's influence. But the evidence, the gun, the journal, the carvings was overwhelming. She too was sentenced to life. The homestead was searched for other victims, the sisters' rituals raising fears of more crimes, but no further evidence was found. Their darkness, it seemed, was confined to Mara and Juniper. Ethan stood at the trailhead months later, Mara's photo in his hand, Juniper's bell tucked in his pocket. He'd always believed the mountains held the truth, but not like this. The case became a cautionary tale, a reminder that evil can hide behind a kind smile, even in the wild places we seek for peace. I read about this case in a faded online article, and it stayed with me the way trust can turn deadly in a heartbeat. What haunts me most is this. How many other secrets are buried in those woods, waiting for someone to stumble across them? The Appalachian Trail is a place of beauty and escape, but for Mara and Juniper, it became a grave proof that the darkest monsters aren't bears or storms, but the ones who walk among us, hiding in plain sight. Well, have you ever heard of a case like this? Comment your thoughts. That's all for today. Thanks for watching, and catch you in the next one.